History 2323 lecture on the reform movements. And the first reformers were farmers because that's the majority of Americans. So they organized politically beginning in the 1870s, and you can see they overlap with the Greenbackers, Grangers, Farmers Alliance, Populists, and then then the Progressives will be different because you see they'll focus on urban issues rather than rural issues. But anyways, the presidents from the Greenback period through the Populists, you can see they're mainly Republican, except for Cleveland elected non-consecutively, and then Wilson will be the first progressive Democrat. Okay, the key problems for farmers were falling prices. That's due to deflation. There wasn't enough currency in circulation, in part because everything had to be backed by gold and silver. Okay, there was still floating around, though, these greenbacks that were printed during the Civil War. They wanted to keep them in circulation because remember, when you have money backed by nothing, that causes inflation. And that helps people that are suffering from deflation. So anyways, that's going to be the name of their cause initially. The greenbackers keep it in circulation, but the Specie Resumption Act is going to recall all those greenbacks and destroy them and then create money that's backed by gold or silver. So this is only a short-lived party, although it did have a candidate for president. The second thing that was causing falling prices is overproduction. American farmers were producing way too much. They didn't have the markets to sell those things to, so that also caused problems. Second issue, major issue, falling prices first. Second issue is rising costs. So railroads, is basically all railroads here. They are charging farmers, in some cases, so much for transporting their grain from the Midwest to the East Coast markets to sell that the trains companies were making more money than the farmers were, quite a bit more money. And then it was harder and harder to borrow money was another issue. So farmers blamed the federal government on creating these monsters, the railroad companies, because they had given away a lot of free federal land to encourage train tracks to be built. So this will be where they begin to push to have laws to control the power of the railroads. Okay, so the Greenback parties will start this. Okay, they don't have a founder. They're going to target that first issue. They try to prevent, that's the name of their cause, prevent the recall. They have, that candidate wasn't much. The one I want you to remember is the 1880 candidate, James B. Weaver. And when we get to 1892, you'll see that the populist candidate is the same guy. So these groups have different names, everything, but they have a lot of the same agenda politically. So Greenbackers kind of disappear once the Greenbacks are gone. So they're replaced by the Grangers, also called the Patrons of Husbandry. They're going to target that second issue, rising costs. So they want the railroads broken up. Railroads have control of them, not just because they control the trains and so on, but also they also own the grain elevators where the grain is stored. And like I told you already, profits, sometimes more of the profit went to the railroads than to the farmers who grew it, worked all year to grow it. So trains also own the scales that weighed. When you're weighing tons and tons and tons of grain, and again, I'm not a farmer, I don't have a background on that, but that you can tip the scale easily. And then also moisture content inside grain. You have a grade A, a grade B, a grade C. The more plump it is, the higher value it is. That was all determined by the railroads as well. So the farmers were at the mercy of the railroads for everything here. So Mr. Kelly is going to form this thing. And you can see they have a pretty broad agenda. They want to create co-ops. You'll see this in many rural towns still. You'll see co-op written on something. They buy in bulk. And it's like the Sam's Club or the Costco concept. You buy big and then it's cheaper. Okay. Also, farmers have a tough time when you have a bad year, whether it's drought or whether it's, infestation by insects. So there was insurance. They wanted to have insurance for crops. They wanted to have their own farmers' banks. Rather than having grain elevators owned by the railroads, they now want to have their own grain elevators. They call them warehouses. And rather than buying plows and stuff that were made on East Coast factories, they want to make their own factories and produce plows in the Midwest, which would be cheaper as well. So they also begin to get active politically, and they want to regulate railroads. And so the Wabash decision, initially the railroads, the Supreme Court allowed them to regulate. But again, if you know your constitutional laws, uh, a company within a state is controlled by that state. When a company goes beyond a state line, it's controlled by Congress. And so the Wabash decision, it reverses that earlier decision, and it says only Congress can control the railroads. State legislatures can't. And so that will lead to the Interstate Commerce Act, with ICA, which will create the first federal regulatory agency, the ICC, Interstate Commerce Commission, which still regulates trucking, semi stuff on the road, and railroad traffic in the present day, to the present day. It's the oldest federal agency. So Grangers taught farmers how to organize, run a political party, so forth. But still, you're going to have another group come, and that's going to be the Farmers Alliance, and they will have a broader agenda, and they become a political party outright. Now, I should have said the Grangers never got involved directly in politics. They're founded by S.O. Dawes in Texas. Okay, you can see some of their agenda there, and then they will become more and more active politically, and eventually they become the Populists, the People's Party. They've got these ideas. I think the text will cover some of this. It's hard to explain quickly. The sub-treasury plan. They want more money in circulation, so that's a greenback issue from way back. They want lower tariffs. They want end national banks. They want a federal income tax, direct election senators. Now you start to see here that these are things that are going to become 16th Amendment for federal income tax. Direct election of senators is the 17th Amendment. So there's going to be ideas that the populists will have / Farmers Alliance that the progressives will implement. So these ideas are not going to be, because they don't happen right away, they're still going to be there for later political reform groups to take and carry over the finish line. The populists will have a very short lifespan, though, because they here's more of their agenda. You can read through that. But they will have, they make a decision. They're strong in the West and the South, but they're not strong in the North and the East. And so they make a decision in 1896 to support William Jennings Bryan, who is also pro-silver, more coinage of silver, because more money you get in circulation is going to cause inflation, which helps people that are in debt. And so Bryan in 1896 is both the Democrat and the populist candidate. And McKinley is the Republican. McKinley will win the election. And so Bryan, he's going to actually run 2 more times as a Democrat. But because the populists had supported a Democrat, there's really no need to have a populist party, because if you're going to support one of the major parties, that's what you should do. So, however, the populists will have, like I told you, lots of things that will keep on going, and we'll mention them over and over again through the next, all the way up through the New Deal, the 1930s. You'll see elements of the populist Farmers Alliance come into play in the progressive movement and beyond.